Sure, will do, Josh. Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be here with the other speakers from the US and also with South Korea as we share what we think we know and what we think we're learning. It's a pretty exciting journey and it's been underway for a while. And at events like this, you really get a sense for what people have been accomplishing. And each achievement begets new, more complicated questions and more exciting opportunities. So it's really great to take a pause and share in events like this to see what's going on. As Josh said, where I work, BIA Advisory Services, we specialize in looking at the finances and economics of what's going on in local media markets. Typically that's advertising revenue, but we also track other kinds of revenue. And I guess more generally, lately, what we've been doing with a lot of our clients is looking at the intersections of business models and innovative technologies coming into media and local markets and how they meet those marketplaces. So that's how we look at something like Next Gen TV, ATSC 3.0. The marketplace, and Ann and others have been talking. Ann, you were talking about monetization and who's got commercial agreements and is money changing hands. It's sort of pre-market conditions now, but the evolution is underway clearly. And as Lynn Claudy said, there's 150 members of ATSC organizations. So there's an ecosystem developing around all of this innovation. So the thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is a view that we've been developing about what the marketplace looks like. We know a fair amount about the technology and what the technology agenda is in terms of what's been achieved and what's looking to be achieved next. And we've looked at some use cases without economics or really marketplace interaction, but here are things that could be done. And here are some target segments that could be targeted. And there's some initial interest, and several examples of DigiCap and companies like Spectra achieving some marketplace traction. Money is actually changing hands for services. So I wanted to kind of build up a little bit of that narrative, but then get to the revenue forecast. What in the US market, at least, are we thinking about in terms of revenue possibilities? Then I'll offer a few takeaways. So when we look at revenue forecasting, mostly we focus on advertising forecast, and that's nobody knows the future. Also, I'll say that, of course, but we go out 5 years with our advertising revenue forecast for 16 media in each of the US media markets. So that's got a degree of speculation, a degree of science, and a degree of crossing your fingers. But it's a pretty well benchmarked practice. Something like a new technology coming into the marketplace like ATSC 3.0, Next Gen TV, there is no market. There's analogous markets or adjacent markets clearly, and that's what we're looking at. Like Ann shared one study showing that ATSC 3.0's data distribution capabilities maybe has a 10x advantage over cellular. Great. I mean, those are the kind of things that we'd love to see, and that factors into the way that we look at what that marketplace might evolve to be in terms of scale and character. So for Next Gen TV, we figure there's probably 4 phases that make sense to think about and lots of sub-phases. And I put some timeframes around this just to give a sense. Phase 1 began before 2020, as Lynn pointed out, when ATSC 3.0 began to be adopted on a voluntary basis. But it's sort of proof of technology. We have a technology, we have a set of standard specifications. Here's how it works. We're building and operating it. That's what it looks like. Now we're starting to come out of that, but in things like the Detroit testbed and some of the progress we've been hearing from our South Korean colleagues about multi-frequency networks and handoffs, that's still a little bit of proof of technology moving into proof of use cases. So we're starting to see that this year with the distance education. Clearly, that's moving into not just a use case, but actually customer bases and businesses. So phase 2, we're into now. Here's what the technology can do, and let us show you that it actually does it. And in some cases, that's actually being done with ATSC 1.0, just because of its scale of deployment versus ATSC 3.0. But we're kind of in that phase 2, moving into phase 3. And there's some early indicators that we already are there in some level. And that's proof of customer bases. So is there a technology? Great. What can a technology do? And does anybody really care about that? That moves us into phase 3. There are actual living, breathing customers that are interested in this and are willing to pay money for it. That's great, because then all of these companies involved in gatherings like this have a way to earn a living. We like that. And we provide value for different constituencies, government, education, and the consumer marketplace. And then phase 4, okay, we have a technology, it can do things. People care about that in terms of customers and how many of them and how much are they willing to pay. That's phase 4. And as we've seen from some of the projections on the consumer market side, the CTA and then Ann's more generous view of consumer TV set adoption for next gen TV by 2025, that's when we kind of kick it off for our revenue forecast. We've done revenue forecasts for different parts of next gen TV. In this presentation, I'm just going to focus on non-core, the data casting side of things. So let's talk a bit about that. And I won't go through all these details. We're getting a bit into our timeline here for the event, which has been really wonderful. But in this this table, I just run through a few more examples of what I was just talking about at a high level. So proof of technology, we're moving from 1.0 to 3.0. We're starting to get into things like what's the data capacity? Can we establish service level agreements and meet certain quality assurance expectations? We've got single frequency networks, so distributed transmission systems. So on and so forth. Use cases, public safety we've heard about, education we've heard about, different kinds of digital signage. We're moving into automotive. There's other things I could have put in here too. ATSC 1.0, there are deployments in the field now with ATSC 1.0 receivers that have ATSC 3.0 capability or are relatively easy to upgrade, even field upgrades. And then proof of business scale, that will come next. And then we'll say, okay, what's the unique selling prospect? You could do it on cellular, you could do it on 5G, you could do it on satellite for that matter, you can do it over various forms of internet connectivity. What's the unique selling proposition for next gen TV? What's the total addressable market? And for those involved in these different business enterprises, what's the return on investment? Generally, what's the sustainable, scalable revenue? So we're starting to get into some business metrics, not just the technology metrics. I won't go through all these use cases, but we've heard about many of these use cases in the various presentations today. And they kind of break out into maybe 2 different axes, if you will. Who's the intended receiver? Typically, it's going to be some sort of a fixed receiver like a home or a mobile receiver like a car. And then what is the service being provided? That breaks up probably into a couple of different general categories. Large file distribution, cloud-based content distribution network, whatever, or some sort of streaming media like OTT services over the air. And we've heard about a number of different use cases here, from GPS to rear seat entertainment. I love to collect acronyms, so that's RSE is a good one for me. The mandatory logo wall, some of the companies that have been active in the US building some of these things out. And we've heard from a number of these companies and a number of the use cases, so I won't take your time to read through this table now, but Spectra has come up a number of times. Of course, Pearl and One Media has done so much great work, and Sam shared some of what's going on with NAB Pilot. And there's other companies that are deploying in one of those first 1 or 2 phases, maybe moving into phase 3. So it gets to the numbers now, the point of my presentation. So there's technology, there is proof of technology. We're starting to move into, there's use cases, there's ways to use the technology that could be interesting. And now we're starting to look at customers who say, yeah, I'm going to raise my hand, I care. And then we get into that last scale part. So this is non-core, non-consumer, non-entertainment, non-rear seat entertainment. This is data casting for some of these new things. Adjacent markets or entirely new markets that broadcasters can enter with their spectrum and data capabilities that NextGen TV brings. So the curve really starts its story 2022, 2023 with low dollar volumes, and then it scales up. We took our forecast out to 2023. And what we did was for those 4 phases, we made different assumptions. Okay, low adoption, low scale, low revenue, a middle case, and then a high case where there's just going to be a substantial take up. The scale is going to grow in terms of the customer base, the numbers of services, the value of those services, and so on. So you can see just generally this curve, we ramp it up to 3 scenarios, the low, middle, and high case, to 2030, the end of our forecast period. So we're saying by 2030, with the utilization of say 7 megabits per second, and being deep into phase 4, we have a sustainable, scalable set of business offers. $15 billion could be brought in for broadcasters' use of next-gen spectrum, other than for the traditional TV business, advertising supported. Just under $11 billion for the middle case and over $6 billion for the low case. So basically, in our view, if we add this all up, we're saying, hey, you know, probably in the least likely case, broadcasters are going to be able to pick up another $6.4 billion with the use of next-gen's capabilities. If things go well, it could be $15 billion, more than twice as much of that. And then anybody in the forecasting business makes regular updates. So we'll continue to do that. But sitting here today at the end of 2021, that's kind of how we're adding it up. Now, to put this in context, I mentioned that we do forecasting of revenues for local media, including local TV, of course. So we say the key revenue sources now are over-the-air OTA advertising, basically. So that's that blue bar in the bottom. By the end of this year, we're saying about $15 billion in advertising revenue local TV stations will generate. Fast forward in that bottom bar to 2030, about $20 billion. So another $5 billion over the rest of the decade growth in advertising. Retransmission rates or subscriber fees, that's the middle bar. In some cases, TV groups earn more from subscriber fees, those retransmission fees, than they do from their advertising. And you can see that the subscriber fees, what MVPDs pay broadcasters, scales relatively nicely over this time period as well. And then in 2025, and you see it start to ramp up early in 2027 up to 2023, using our middle scenario for non-core datacasting growth, we're seeing that the middle scenario delivering almost $11 billion, which is over half of what stations are earning over the air and a good chunk of what they're earning from subscriber fees. So that's the middle case. That's kind of a look at what the revenue for broadcasters could be entering in to non-core broadcast services with their next-gen capabilities. So I'll do this efficiently here. Entry into the data marketplace, non-core, provides significant upsides to the broadcast model and the broadcast industry and the various participants and ecosystem. It's a new infrastructure. It requires being built out. It's a whole tech stack. We've been hearing from the speakers today what that looks like and what its capabilities are and what the next steps are to improve that. The 4 phases I talked about, we're somewhere in phase 1, phase 2, maybe some early phase 3 in some cases. That non-core revenue forecast is pretty attractive, another $10 billion per year by 2030 in the middle case. And that non-core is material revenue compared to what broadcasters are generating now. So this is not smoke and mirrors, or this is not just money that's kind of, okay, we'll take it if we get it. It's serious money. So it merits a serious business commitment and endeavor. And then the other thing is, as I showed in that previous chart, this is incremental to the core business. So this is with that investment in the 3.0 infrastructure and a set of services and the whole ecosystem that goes with it. It's a significant amount of capital that would be infused into the broadcast industry. And again, we're just tracking the US industry. So Josh, there's a quick view of some of the work we've been doing that we wanted to share with you and put some numbers on some of the things that we're all talking about here. So back to you, Josh. Thank you.